Have you heard that Miss Marple and Agatha Christie's grandmother were one and the same person? Well, such insinuations were fueled by no one else than the writer herself. Yet how true that was in reality? In this video you will learn the real-life origins of the famous lady detective.
The shot sounded odd, so it took my attention.
Miss Jane Marple was an elderly spinster who solved crimes using analogies to English village life.
It's not good enough. We've got to know Heather's exact words.
Murder at the Vicarage was published in 1930, but I cannot remember where, when or how I wrote it, why I came to write it, or even what suggested to me that I should select a new character, Miss Marple, to act as a sleuth in the story. Certainly at the time I had no intention of continuing her for the rest of my life. I didn't know that she was to become a rival to Hercule Poirot. Agatha Christie shared detailed records of her writing and thinking process in her famous autobiography book. Just like with Poirot, she gave tons of clues and uncovered interesting details about Miss Marple's prototypes in her own words. Interestingly, although the eccentric Hercule Poirot and the charming Miss Marple have never met on the pages of Christie's mysteries, it turns out that the Belgian private detective has actually ignited the first sparks of the portrait of his charming female counterpart. Christie described how it happened. I think it is possible that Miss Marple arose from the pleasure I had taken in portraying Dr. Shepherd's sister in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. She had been my favorite character in the book, an acidulated spinster full of curiosity, knowing everything, hearing everything, the complete detective service in the home. When the book was adapted as a play, one of the things that saddened me most was Caroline's removal. Instead, the doctor was provided with another sister, a much younger one, a pretty girl who could supply Poirot with romantic interest.
I saw something quite peculiar just now.
Really?
First of all, Ralph Peyton is here and staying at the White Hart.
Staying there?
Staying there? And he was talking to a girl.
Obviously, such a tasteless and daring intrusion into the beloved character insulted Agatha. Imagine you paint a picture of some particularly interesting, sophisticated and deep female character who adds up a lot to the perception of others, and then someone suddenly erases her for the fact that she is too old to be attractive enough for an average theatre goer, as some director thought.
No, Caroline. Poirot said just those people he named.
Well, I'll just drive you up there then, that's all. Hercule won't mind. I don't have to come in.
Ruthlessly, isn't it? Yet this precedent served as a perfect plan of revenge that was to be served cold. If you dare to get rid of my support character, I'll give her the key part. I think at that moment in St. Mary Mead, though I didn't know it yet, Miss Marple was born, and with her Miss Hartnell, Miss Weatherby and Colonel and Miss Bantry, they're all there, lined up below the borderline of consciousness, ready to come to life and step out on the stage. This way, the arrival of Miss Marple was somewhat unexpected and yet perfectly orchestrated. I wrote a series of 6 short stories for a magazine and chose 6 people whom I thought might meet once in a week in a small village and describe some unsolved crime. I started with Miss Jane Marple, the sort of an old lady who would have been rather like some of my grandmother's Ealing cronies, old ladies whom I have met in so many villages where I have gone to stay as a girl. And here it comes, the first notion of Agatha Christie's own granny in relation to the beloved character of Marple. The tip-to-toe Victorian Mrs. Miller was the mother of Agatha's father, and oddly an aunt of Christie's own mother, which earned her the family nickname of Auntie Granny. Since my father had married the niece of his stepmother, his American father's English second wife, and since he called her mother, whilst his wife continued to call her auntie, she was usually known officially as Auntie Granny. Raise your hand those who found it too difficult to understand this family relation. Her husband had business in the United States, which, according to Agatha, turned out to be one of the success stories of America. So she had been passing her life in Victorian contentment and lived to 92.
Do you feel, remunerated?
Not in the slightest. But I do feel rejuvenated.
Yes, of course.
There are a couple of funny episodes that Agatha describes with the utmost detail in her autobiography that highlight the key personal traits that her Auntie Granny shared with Jane Marple. My brother and sister had a tame squirrel as a pet in the house for about a year. When Granny, after picking it up with a broken paw in the garden one day, had said sapiently, "Mark my words, that squirrel will be off in the chimney one of those days." It went up the chimney 5 days later.
Did you know that pigs are the closest animals to men? Did you know that, Miss Marple?
No.
We've named all of ours after generals in the British Army.
Those powers of prophecy, second sight, and somehow a built-in sense of suspicion of everything and everyone were the traits Miss Marple definitely borrowed from Christie's grandmother. There was no unkindness in Miss Marple. She just didn't trust people. Though she expected the worst, she often accepted people kindly, in spite of what they were.
Which does rather...
Stick out your tongue. Say ah.
Ah.
Well, put it back.
Which does rather suggest poison.
I think we should leave that to the coroner, don't you?
Being an introverted type of person herself, Christie didn't aim for living a public life and sharing too much personal behind the scenes with the ever-curious public and journalists. Moreover, she always insisted that she wasn't used to inventing her characters out of real-life acquaintances, to quite a few exceptions, I must say. Perhaps that was the reason she had to correct herself later in the text, not to give that false impression that Marple is a proper portrayal of her granny. Miss Marple wasn't in any way a picture of my grandmother. She was far more fussy and spinsterish than my grandmother ever was. But one thing she did have in common with her: though a cheerful person, she always expected the worst of everyone and everything, and was, with almost frightening accuracy, usually proved right.
She was a simple soul, friendly enough. Bit of a bore, but you don't kill someone for that. If you did, there'd be no one left in the village.
Another difference is that Miss Marple never married, and her closest living relatives were her nephew and nieces, while that certainly was not the case for the writer's granny.
But
Hello, Aunt Jane.
my favourite nephew.
And just like with Poirot, Christie gave Marple some of her own features. For example, in The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, we learn that Miss Jane Marple knows drugs and poisons from her days at Bridgehampton Hospital during the war. Christie learned about poisons working at the Torquay Hospital dispensary during World War I.
There's the principal ingredient of it is,
Phenylethylamilonylurea. I know it well from my days at Bridgehampton Hospital during the war. Mixed with alcohol, it causes respiratory depression, a drop in blood pressure, a feeble heartbeat. Quite deadly, in fact.
Unlike in the case of Hercule Poirot, Christie never publicly shared the story of how she came up with the name of the female detective. There are a couple of tentative suggestions that she may have taken the name from Marple railway station through which she used to pass, or from Marple Hall, the countryside residence located near her elder sister Madge, Margaret Ward's home at Ebney Hall. The last idea looks more plausible, since it is known that Christie was very much fond of this ancient estate and based several of her novels on it. And this time again, much like with Poirot, Christie created herself troubles with her own hands when it comes to the age of the detective. Miss Marple was born at the age of 65 to 70, which, as with Poirot, proved most unfortunate, because she was going to have to last a long time in my life. Indeed, Miss Marple appeared in 12 novels and 20 stories, and imagine 41 years passed between the first story and the last one. The stories were published in England under the title of The 13 Problems and in America as The Tuesday Club Murders.
I think it would be a good idea, Miss Marple, if I dropped round later and had the whole story from you.
Oh, sure you're far too busy to listen to my little ideas, Inspector.
Just like with Poirot, there were numerous attempts to portray Miss Marple on screen. Margaret Rutherford in the 60s, Angela Lansbury in the single film in 1980, which then brought her the similar leading role of Jessica Fletcher in the American series Murder, She Wrote, and several actresses in the TV series, out of whom the great Joan Hickson is considered to be the canonical one. She starred as Jane Marple for 8 years from 1984 to 1992, and although Agatha Christie had no chance to see her in this role, it is still believed she would definitely get her approval. There is a curious historical anecdote that when in the 1940s Joan Hickson appeared on stage in another Agatha Christie play, Appointment with Death, she was seen by Christie, who then wrote her a personal note: "I hope one day you will play my dear Miss Marple." And it worked! In the next video, we shall rank all Miss Marple actresses of all epochs and pick the best one for the role. Subscribe not to miss it coming. People never stop writing to me nowadays to suggest that Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot should meet. But why should they? I'm sure they wouldn't enjoy it at all. Hercule Poirot, the complete egoist, would not like being taught his business by an elderly spinster lady. He was a professional sleuth. He wouldn't be at home at all in Miss Marple's world. No, they're both stars. They are the stars in their own right. I shall not let them meet unless I feel a sudden and unexpected urge to do so.
Of course, the vicar.
Although such an unexpected urge never came about, you now know that there was a hidden Poirot trace in the birth of the character of Jane Marple, who was largely based on the type of a prudent Victorian lady, similar to Christie's own grandma.
Well, I never would have guessed that ending. I mean, that girl, she looks so nice.
Human nature, Jerry dear. The world of the cinema, the village, it's all quite the same, really.
Miss Jane Marple doesn't look like your average detective. And Joan Hickson definitely managed to convey her peculiar personality, which is loved by many and often misunderstood by others.
I just happened to be...
Of course you did.
But was she actually the best Marple out there? In this episode, we shall have a look at different actresses who had put on the sleuth lady hat and rank their performance to find the perfect fit for the role. Miss Marple was born at the age of 65 to 70, which, as with Poirot, proved most unfortunate because she was going to have to last a long time in my life. Not only did Christie make a writer's life harder for herself, but she certainly proposed a difficult challenge for future casting directors.
You know the saying, once an actress, always an actress.
Oh, I do know the saying. But what does it have to do with you?
On the one hand, elderly actresses often complain that there is only a fraction of interesting roles for their age group. On the other, there are obviously fewer actresses capable of playing this pretty old fluffy Jane Marple, as Christie called her.
Save it for the Oscars.
Her character is unusual and challenging indeed. First of all, she is a detective, a private. No, rather an enthusiastic amateur whose non-academic and unobscured perception of the events help her come to conclusions most unexpected, but that turn out to be highly accurate, contrary to the murderer's wish. At the same time, she doesn't look like a detective at all. But don't be too quick to jump to conclusions, cause looks might be deceiving.
Human nature, Jerry dear. The world of the cinema, the village, it's all quite the same, really.
So, the first one to try her luck with the role of Jane Marple was an English actress, Gracie Fields, who played this role in the now lost US TV adaptation of Murder is Announced, which aired just once on 13th of December 1956. Some say that copies of this film do still exist within private archives. However, they've been sadly inaccessible for all those years. Curiously, those who saw the movie reckon that Gracie plays Marple as Scottish. No such idea was given by Christie herself, so this accent might have sounded rather strange to the ears of Miss Marple purists. The next take on the role was made in the early 1960s by celebrated English actress Margaret Rutherford, who was a close friend of the Christie family. The 4 films were MGM adaptations of the novels, which were surprisingly turned into light-hearted comedies.
I fear we're taking a grave risk of seeming inquisitive.
A calculated one, Mr. Stringer. On we go.
Rutherford's Jane Marple had a colorful character, respectable but bossy and, of course, eccentric. At the same time, she somehow missed entirely the quietness and sharpness that were highlighted in the novels. The films were only loosely based on Agatha Christie's text. Moreover, 2 of them originally involved Poirot.
Now you saw that, didn't you? Do you think anyone will believe us?
It is well known that Christie wasn't too keen on Rutherford's comic version of Marple, and still dedicated one of the next Marple novels, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, to Rutherford.
Well, if they won't believe us, we'll just have to go and solve this crime ourselves, won't we?
Interestingly, then young actress Joan Hickson, who would successfully become Jane Marple in the future, had the role of a housekeeper in this movie. This is not an uncommon coincidence for Christie's numerous television adaptations. The same happened to David Suchet, who was first engaged as Inspector Japp and not Hercule Poirot. Did you know that fact?
A woman has been strangled. I saw it.
Strangled?
Yes, strangled.
Madam, don't you think perhaps you had a little nap and maybe had a bad dream?
Young man, I was not dreaming. I saw it. Ask them. They saw it happen.
Another curious fact, many of you know and have probably watched at least some episodes from the highly popular American series Murder, She Wrote. Featuring a very similar character of a female sleuth, Jessica Fletcher, the drama TV series was indeed inspired by Miss Marple's novels by Christie, though it was a completely standalone production of CBS. The part was marvelously played by the gorgeous English actress Angela Lansbury and spanned 12 seasons from 1984 to 1996. Well, the thing is that Angela has actually first played the role of the original Miss Marple in the 1980 The Mirror Cracked alongside fabulous Elizabeth Taylor. I was intrigued by the cast and jumped to watch it the next evening, and while I was enjoying the characters of the stunning actress duo of Liz Taylor and Kim Novak exchanging sharp, sarcastic remarks,
What a delightful surprise.
Looking lovely as always. Of course, there are fewer lights on than usual. In fact, any fewer, and I'd need a seeing eye dog.
Oh, I shouldn't bother to buy one, dear. In that wig, you could play Lassie.
the part of Miss Marple left me in doubt. All in all, Lansbury is certainly a good fit, and I didn't mind her Marple smoking, for example. Why not at the end of the day? Yet there was something I couldn't get out of my head while watching her scenes. Lansbury was only 54 when she played the role, so her looks were heavily modified by makeup artists. Alas, this didn't conceal her posture, flawless skin on the neck, and smooth gestures which couldn't belong to a lady in her 70s. Perhaps this made my overall initial plausible perception of the movie changed by the end of it.
Well, show business is just a business, Aunt Jane.
What we need is a little more business and a little less show.
However, it is believed that Lansbury's performance could have been appreciated by Christie, though I couldn't find a source for such a suggestion.
Gossip. I prefer to call it a healthy interest in human nature.
Anyways, this role apparently won Angela Lansbury her long-standing engagement in the Murder, She Wrote. An amusing thing happened during the release of the film. The original publicity department ruined the ending of the movie by releasing promotional materials saying that this was the first time one particular actor has played a murderer. I also tried not to spoil the pleasure for those of you who haven't watched it yet. An American, Helen Hayes, was the next one to appear as Marple in 3 TV films in the 1980s. First Lady of American theatre and the first woman who won Oscar, Grammy, Tony and Emmy awards all together, she initially turned down the role, which she adored. "I didn't want to follow Margaret Rutherford. I can't be that funny," she said then. Well, luckily she changed her mind since viewer reviews were quite positive. I haven't watched her performance yet, but perhaps you did. I would be thrilled to learn what you think and how would you rate her. Please share your thoughts in the comments.
Oh, poppycock, I hate talk like that. I hope you don't mean that just because you're elderly you have a special relationship to death. That's nonsense.
Elderly? I'd never think of myself as elderly. I feel just the same as I did when I was 17. Only then, of course, I pitied anyone over 20, and now I don't.
Then there was the brilliant Joan Hickson, who was blessed for the role by Agatha Christie herself. It happened 40 years earlier in the 1940s, when Joan Hickson had appeared on stage in another Agatha Christie play, Appointment with Death. She was reportedly seen by the writer, who then wrote a personal note to her. "I hope one day you will play my dear Miss Marple." And she did.
Plenty happens in a village. Always something.
Ah, that's just my point. There's always something, isn't there?
All in all, she spent 8 years in the shoes of the village sleuth and won herself never-ending accolades for the effort. Amusingly, when I was a kid, I remember bumping into the Marple series on TV even now and then. I started watching, waiting for Poirot to appear, and when I saw Marple played by Hickson, I usually switched the channel off. I don't know why I did that. Perhaps I couldn't get how such a pale old lady, which has no energy in her, that's what I thought, silly child, well, how she could even solve anything. How come she sniffs around the murder scene and then suddenly comes to conclusions just like out of the blue?
Sorry about all this.
Oh, but I missed it, you know. I missed it very much.
Now, when I'm watching the movies, I do have such an impression sometimes, but luckily now I've grown up to see that depth and wisdom this lady got from living a long life of being genuinely attentive to people's nature. She just knows what to look for and how to listen, and the answers will come to her mind themselves. Having seen several Marple incarnations, I can say that it was only Hickson's performance that faithfully conveyed that depth to the scale that was initially supposed by Agatha Christie.
I came to offer you some advice.
Oh, my God! The League of Decency.
Which I hope might help in the difficult time ahead.
What are you talking about?
Her follower from ITV broadcast, Geraldine McEwan, did a great job too, and although I generally loved her portrait of a no-matter sleuth, her Marple, at least for me, looks like always wearing that sort of a conspirator smile, always the same. It somehow cut off many other dimensions of her character.
Most crimes, you see, are so absurdly simple. Quite sane and straightforward. In an unpleasant sort of way.
And her follower, Julia Mackenzie, who took over the role in the 4th season, played a slightly different version of Marple. She noted that it was difficult because Agatha Christie wrote her in 2 ways. First, very much what Geraldine McEwan played, a slight, rather Victorian creature. Then, a little sturdier and tweedier. I chose the latter. A lot of people say they don't like the tweedier version, but they are both genuine.
Do you think anyone could possibly guess, Jane, that you and I are practically the same age?
Not for a moment, I'm sure. I'm afraid, you see, I look every minute of my age.
No.
The ITV adaptation heavily changed the plots of the story, so perhaps that was an additional stone in the garden that prevented the public from falling in love with their portrayals. Although that was most certainly made on purpose to make everyone rewatch the series once again, since the screenplay wouldn't be immediately recognizable for Christie's books fans.
I've never believed there's such a thing as a perfect murder. There'll always be something that doesn't quite fit.
So, time to rank our dear Janes. I won't be original here. Joan Hickson did become the face of Marple that comes to my mind every time I read the book or hear her name.
This is a vile business. I didn't realize that things had gone so far.
Although it would certainly be much harder to choose the silver and the bronze medalists here. I think I'll still put Geraldine McKevan as the runner-up. She did a good job and I actually enjoyed the episodes with her without second thoughts. And let Angela Lansbury tentatively take the third place, pending me watching all the actresses to finally make a decision.
I think we should leave that to the coroner, don't you?
Perhaps you have a different opinion. I'd be happy to learn what is your way of thinking about this character and her portrayals. And to wrap up this video, let's now fly over the Atlantic for a holiday in the Caribbean together with our dear Miss Marple. This time the sleuth takes a holiday to the fictitious island of Saint-Henri, where she stays at the Golden Palm Hotel. Well, the names are fictional, yet this place really exists. A Caribbean mystery was shot on location at the Coral Reef Hotel in Barbados, where Christie stayed during her visit to the country in 1958. And which had been the inspiration for the setting of the novel.
Knitting before breakfast? Oh, well, yes, I suppose I was, really. But you know, in England, it'd be 11 this time. Late 11s.
Owners Budge and Cynthia O'Hara were the inspirations for the characters in the novel. They still own the hotel 30 years later when the episode with Joan Hickson was filmed, and were able to share the treasure trove of Christie memorabilia with the cast. By the way, the hotel is still family owned and they've done a brilliant job of keeping the spirit of the time there. I particularly cherish these overseas episodes. They adapt the taste of holidays and lands of eternal summer and warm up rainy autumn evenings. Would you agree? And what a treat to actually see the place the author visited and penned herself. An extra layer of immersion in the story.
Oh, yeah.
Mom.
What is your favorite Poirot's or Marple's murder mystery location? We'll be thrilled to learn more about it in the comments. Meanwhile, check out my other Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes related videos.